Welcome to Introduction to Philosophy of the Human Person. My name is Jordan, and we will be discussing the Pre-Socratic Era. This will be our lesson 2. Okay, and let's proceed. So, to give us a context of the lesson, uh, the term pre-Socratic means before Socrates. It was popularized in 1903 by German scholar Hermann Diels. Socrates was actually alive during the same time as many of the pre-Socratic philosophers, and therefore the term does not imply that these philosophies existed prior to those of Socrates. Rather, the term pre-Socratic relates to the difference in ideology and principles. While many pre-Socratic philosophers produced texts, none have fully survived, and most of what we understand about the pre-Socratic philosophers is based on the fragments of text that remain in the codes of later historians and philosophers, which were usually biased according to our source of from the book Philosophy 101 by Paul Kleinman. So, ibig sabihin po ng pre-Socratic, it doesn't mean that this is before Socrates being alive, but rather Socrates was already alive during that time. It is just that yung term na pre-Socratic only relates to the difference in ideology and principles. Doon lang. Okay? And our objective is to examine the claims of the pre-Socratic philosophers. Ano ba itong mga claims nila? And distinguish every claims made by the pre-Socratic philosophers. Okay? And evaluate the claims made by the pre-Socratic philosophers. So let us define first what do we mean when we say metaphysics? Dahil ang karamihan sa mga sinasabi ng mga pre-Socratic philosophers is all about the metaphysics, okay? How the reality came to be, how the universe came to be, how the origin came to be. So, metaphysics is a branch of philosophy that examines the fundamental nature of reality, including the relationship between mind and matter, between substance and attribute, and between potentiality and actuality. Ito po ay according sa Wikipedia. But we will not be dealing metaphysics ngayon in its detail, pero at least alam natin kung anong meaning ng metaphysics, and we will be dealing metaphysics pagdating natin sa branches of philosophy, which we will be discussing after this particular lesson. So in short, metaphysics is the study of existence and reality. So the first pre-Socratic philosophers, we have the Milesian school. So Milesian school, the first pre-Socratic philosophers existed in the city of Miletus, along the western coast of Anatolia, na ang modern name niya na ngayon is tinatawag nating Turkey. So from Miletus came three important pre-Socratic philosophers. We have Thales, Anaximander, and Anaximenes. Unahin natin si Thales. One of the most important pre-Socratic philosophers na si Thales claimed that the arche. So, if you are reading the Bible, meron tayong John 1:1, di ba? In arche and ho logos. In the beginning was the Word. So, the arche na ito yung the beginning. The beginning or the single element was water. So, yan yung kanyang claim that the single element was water. In the beginning, there was water. Thales determined that water could experience principles of change like evaporation and condensation, therefore allowing for it to be gaseous or solid. So, ibig sabihin, if the origin of the universe was water, then ito yung kanyang explanation because it can experience principles of change like ito ay nag-evaporate, nagko-condensate, and allowing it to be gaseous at nagiging solid. So he also knew that water was responsible for moisture, which heat was generated from, and nourishment. Thales even believed the earth floated on water. Okay? So naniniwala daw si Thales that the earth floated on water. But when examined, ito ba ay observed ni Thales? I don't think so. Next is Anaximander. Following Thales, the next major philosopher to come out of Miletus was Anaximander. Unlike Thales, Anaximander claimed that the single element was actually an undefined, unlimited, and indefinite substance known as apeiron. So makikita natin dito that the apeiron, ang kanyang mga characteristics or the nature of this apeiron is undefined and unlimited. Next is indefinite substance. If this is undefined, then how are we be able to call this an apeiron, which is, I think, a self-defeating claim. And from this, opposites like moist and dry and cold and hot separated from each other. Yun yung kanyang claim. And Anaximander is known for being the first philosopher that we know of to have left writings of his work. And if you are familiar noong mga time po nila, wala pa pong mga papel na kagaya natin ngayon. So basically, itong ginagamit nila ay na mga notes is nakasulat lang sa mga balat ng hayop o yung tinatawag natin mga scrolls. Okay? So, next is Anaximenes, the last important pre-Socratic philosopher of the Milesian school, who believed the single element was air. Okay? The single element was air. In the beginning, there was air. So, kung titingnan natin ito, si Thales, in the beginning, there was water. Kay Anaximander, in the beginning, there was an apeiron. And kay Anaximenes naman, in the beginning, there was air. According to Anaximenes, air is everywhere and has the ability to undergo process and become transformed into other things such as water, clouds, wind, fire, and even the earth. So makikita natin, guys, that they are really struggling to justify the origin of the universe, at kaya nagkakaroon sila ng mga ganitong claim. Next is the Pythagorean school, and we are all familiar with Pythagoras na sa ating math subject, si Pythagorean theorem, so on and so forth. So philosopher and mathematician Pythagoras, perhaps most famous for the Pythagorean theorem or the Pythagorean theorem, as what other also will pronounce his name, and named after, ang Pythagorean theorem daw was named after him. He believed that the basis of all reality was mathematical relations and that mathematics governed everything. So in the beginning, there was mathematics, and how did mathematics created this universe is a big question if that's the case. And if we ask Pythagorean right now, how did the universe come to be? I don't think if he will really answer in the beginning there was numbers, and then numbers created this reality that we live in. And to Pythagoras, numbers were sacred, and with the use of mathematics, everything could be measured and predicted. While it is true that with the use of mathematics, we can do a lot of things, but the thing is, if you account the creation, the origin of the universe by using pure mathematics alone, or even mathematics arbitrarily, we cannot really justify that. We cannot really account for the origin of the universe. So, paano yun? Saan tayo galing? Tayo mga human, are we just product of these mathematical relations? And which is a very, very big problem. And again, gaya ng introduction kanina, very limited lang ang knowledge natin about them. Why? Because of the lack of the documents. So let's have Ephesian school. The Ephesian school was based on the work of one man named Heraclitus and Ephesus. Okay, Heraclitus believed that everything in nature is constantly changing or in a state of flux. So, ibig sabihin ng state of flux, the action or process of flowing or flowing out. So, the nature is constantly changing. There is no such thing as the uniformity of nature. And Heraclitus believed that the single element was fire and that everything was a manifestation of fire. So we have, in the beginning was water, in the beginning was air, in the beginning was a peiron, and here comes Heraclitus claiming that in the beginning was fire and that everything was a manifestation of fire. I don't know if uh, Heraclitus also meant that even human beings were just manifestation of fire. If that's the case, then uh, medyo mahirap yon if we are just manifestation of fire at walang writings to justify that we are just a manifestation of fire. Next, the Eleatic school. The Eleatic school was based in Colophon, an ancient city not far from Miletus. So halos magkalapit lang. From this region came four important pre-Socratic philosophers. We have Xenophanes, Parmenides, Zeno, and Miletus. All right, let's proceed. Unahin natin si Xenophanes of Colophon. So Xenophanes is known for his critique of religion and mythology. In particular, he attacked the notion that the gods were anthropomorphic. Na ang ibig sabihin is these gods has human characteristics or have human characteristics. Okay? So, ano ba talaga? Does God have human characteristics? Or if there is a being that really exists, such an infinite being, did God design human being to really have this characteristic, and then we just perceive that this is our characteristic and project these characteristic na somehow like or parang katulad ng characteristic ng Diyos, or pinoproject natin iyon because these people actually doesn't have an accurate view of God. At yun yung isa sa malaking problema, kaya nagkakaroon tayo ng claims, maraming claims about reality. And Xenophanes believed that there was one God, so naniniwala din naman siya na merong Diyos, and that while it did not physically move, itong Diyos na ito, hindi daw kumikilos physically. If this God is physical, then how can he be God, and doesn't also have the ability to hear, see, and think? Okay, where it did not physically move. Okay, sorry. It did not physically move but had the ability to hear, see, and think, and controlled the world with his thoughts. So, kahit paano itong Diyos na ito, hindi naman super limited ang kanyang description. Okay? So, able naman ang Diyos na ito to hear, see, and think, and control the world with his thoughts. However, this will take us to an idea of a deism. Deism, hindi ko sinasabi na dahil sa idea ni Xenophanes kaya nagkaroon ng deism. What I see here is dahil sa idea na to, ako personally ay nakikita ko na parang ganito ang dinidescribe sa deism. Okay? Na ang ibig sabihin ng deism, it is a 17th to 18th century idea that God does not interact directly with that subsequently created world. Now, if the God that Xenophanes described is true, how can he know that this God did not physically move and also had the ability to hear, see, and think, and control the world with his thoughts if this God did not reveal himself to Xenophanes? That's the question. Next is Parmenides of Elea. Parmenides believed reality didn't have to do with the world one experienced, and that it was only through reason, not the senses, but through reason, that one would be able to arrive at truth. Okay? So, isang malaking question dito is, what is truth and how does Parmenides know it? Um, Before ka mag-reason, do you presuppose or do you assume that there is already truth? Or do you reason in order to get to truth? Isa sa malaking question. If you say that you reason in order to get to truth, then how will you know that yung reasoning mo to start with is a true reason, right? Next, Parmenides had an incredible impact on Plato and all the Western philosophy. His work led the school of Ilia to become the first movement to use pure reason as the only criterion for finding truth. And the problem about this pure reason alone is that how will you know if your reasoning is reliable? At Ask yourself, how can I know if my reasoning is reliable? Or you just assume that your reasoning is reliable in order for you to really have a conclusion that yes, my reasoning is reliable, which is a circular reasoning at the end. It really begs the question, and we will be discussing fallacies in the near future, so I hope you also stay tuned. Next, Zeno of Ilia. Zeno of Ilia was Parmenides' most famous student who devoted his time in creating arguments known as paradoxes that defended Parmenides' idea, which we will not be dealing. Yung paradoxes na tinutukoy dito, if you are familiar with the nature of reality, which is the one and the many, yon ang dinidil po ni Zeno, nila Heraclitus. Okay? So, next, in Zeno's most famous paradoxes, the paradoxes of motion, he attempted to show that ontological pluralism, yung ontological pluralism or the nature of reality, is it many? So, the notion that many things exist as opposed to one will actually lead to conclusions that are absurd. So, basically, si Zeno ay hindi naniniwala that reality is many. Naniniwala siya that reality is one, or the nature of reality is one. Okay? Ulitin nga natin. The paradoxes of motion, he attempted to show that ontological pluralism or the nature of reality as many, itong notion na ito that many things exist as opposed to one, will actually lead to conclusions that are absurd. However, Parmenides and Zeno believed that reality existed as one thing and that things like plurality and motion were nothing more than illusions. And I hope we can also flesh this out in the near future. But for now, tandaan muna natin itong mga sinasabi nila. Okay? Zeno argue that there is no such thing as ontological pluralism. There is no such thing as many sa nature ng reality, but there is only one thing in reality, or the nature of reality is one, and the many is just an illusion. Okay, let's proceed. And by the way, you can also comment down sa comment section if meron kayong hindi naunawaan. And para sa mga students ko naman na nanonood nito sa ating discussion after the presentation of this lesson, pwede naman kayong magtanong din. Okay? So let's have Miletus of Samos. Miletus of Samos, who lived around 440 BC, was the last philosopher of the Eleatic school. Continuing the ideas of Parmenides and Zeno of Ilia, Miletus of Samos distinguished between is and seems. Okay, what is and what is seemingly? Sinabing seemingly closer to, parang closer to is, but not what really is. Kumbaga, what is a cell phone? Okay, a cell phone. So nakikita ninyo? This is a cell phone. So it doesn't seem like this is a cell phone. Rather, this is really a cell phone. Sa Tagalog pa ay parang, okay? Seemingly true. So if we have truth, truth is truth. Uh, Truth cannot be seemingly true, but something cannot be. But something can also be seemingly true. But if that thing can be seemingly true, then it's not really true because again, if something is true according to the law of identity, if something is true, then that thing is indeed true. So sabi ni Milesus, when a thing is X, according to Milesus of Samos, it has always to be X and never not X. Therefore, according to this idea, when something is cold, it can never stop being cold. So if we have, let's say, ice. So if the property of ice is that ice is cold, based on what we experience, na ganun nga yung yellow, then kapag pumunta tayo sa ibang lugar at meron din silang ice, it will still be cold. So parang dito nakikita natin yung principle of the law of identity. If something is X, it will always be X. Okay, the atomist school. The atomist school started by Leucippus in the 5th century and passed down by his student Democritus, believed that every physical object is made up of atoms and void. Na ang ibig sabihin ng void, empty space that atoms move in. So empty space that atoms move in, and that are arranged in different ways. This idea is not far from the concepts of atoms that we know today. This school believed that atoms were incredibly small particles, which is true. Na-confirm natin to scientifically. So small that they could not be cut in half. That differed in size, shape, motion, arrangement, and position, and that when put together, these atoms created what is seen in the visible world. So this chair that I'm sitting is made of atoms. This every physical thing is made up of atoms and molecules. Okay? Napag-aralan po natin yan sa ating science lesson. So for your assignment, make an advanced reading of the branches of philosophy, because we will be having a recitation before we start our next session. So any questions, pwede nyo pong ilagay sa comment section para sa mga viewers natin, and para sa mga students ko sa Imus Unida, you can ask the question after this presentation. Thank you so much and have a great day.